Hello. Right, okay, so part 4 today of this little mini series on how to help children keep calm when they are losing control. And we've covered some really good ground this week. I've lost my notes, which is a bit silly, but we've covered some good ground. We've been thinking about we've been thinking about how we approach the situation and what we need to do in order to help us to keep calm. We had a think, we had a think about looking after ourselves, making sure that we are, that we are in a good emotional space, good sleep hygiene, exercise, time out, what have you. And then we've had to think about how we intercept yesterday, how we actually come in and help de-escalate a situation, and what we need to take into account for the run up to the situation, what we might not have been party to, especially if we're talking about siblings having an argument or a fight, or kids having a meltdown for whatever reason. And today I want to have a think about how we then talk to our children and how we educate them, because what we need to be bearing in mind all throughout this, and I say it in nearly every single video that I ever do, is that our children learn from us. We are their teachers, and whether or not we are consciously teaching, or whether or whether they are just absorbing what we are doing through watching, through listening, through mimicking, we are the teacher of our children. And that isn't to say we're always going to get it right. Okay, that isn't to say we're always going to get it right. There are going to be plenty of opportunities for us to get it wrong. But when we are aware, when we make a conscious decision how we are going to educate our children, what we want them to learn, it's about how we are, so how we are individually, how we are as parents, but also how we are in our relationship with our partner, how we are in our relationship with our friends, with our family, how we behave, right? So all of this goes into what we are teaching our children. But when there's been an incident, when there's been a meltdown, when there's been a tantrum, whatever has gone on, what do you do then? So we as I said, we talked yesterday about how we intercept that. Do we go in shouting, all guns blazing? Not helpful. Sometimes you can't help it, but it's not helpful regardless of whether we do it or not. And thinking about helping them to express their emotion, helping them to understand what they're frustrated about, actually telling them to explain to us what they're upset about or angry about. And then do we deal with the situation right there and then in the heat of the moment, or do we let things kind of calm down a bit and then come back to it later? Now, I know from my own experience of being a child and being an adult, so being a child, being an adult and being a parent, that it's far, far, far better to have these conversations when everything has calmed down, and the dust has settled and everybody's feeling a little bit, calmer. That's when you need to go in and have those conversations, exactly as you would do with your partner, right? You have a row with your partner. It doesn't get resolved on the spot there and then. I mean, it might occasionally, but in my experience, it gets resolved later when we're both feeling a little bit less stressed, a little bit less uptight, less upset. And then you come back to the conversation later that evening or the next day, and have the conversation in a calm and reflective manner. And it's no different with children. We talk to children when they are calm and reflective, when they have had a chance to think about what has happened, to think about what they could do differently. And then as their parents, as their teachers, it is our job then to go in and help them understand what has happened. Was that the right thing to do? Was that the right reaction to have? How could you have done that differently? All right, some of you might think that that's all a bit soft. Maybe it is a bit soft, but that's how, you know, that's how I do it with my children. I don't see any point, and that's how I do it in my relationship. You know, I don't see any point at anybody going, I hate shouting. So to the lady that's watching this, it's just been, I'm not going to name you because this goes out to a couple of groups, but I know you've just been on the other one. And I was saying in my other, we were doing a webinar this morning on toxic relationships. And I was saying, you know, there's a big difference between being loud. I'm a very loud person, right? And I get even louder than this when I feel strongly about something, be that good or bad. So people often think that I'm shouting when I'm not shouting. But, you know, if we're talking about, shouting and being angry or being upset and being shouting, nothing's ever resolved then. We can't have a relaxed, rational, sensible conversation when all of those emotions are so heightened. But we can come back to it the next day, or we can come back to it later that day and think about how we could have handled that differently. And that might not just be how the child could have handled that differently. That might be about how we responded to that differently. You know, I often say to my children, if I've got it wrong, I will apologise. Like if I've gone in, I said yesterday about what happens when you go in and the siblings are fighting or arguing, and you just kind of like go in and you just kind of like blame the, let's just say for argument's sake, you blame the older one because you think it's always the older one that's always causing the trouble. It's always, or maybe it's always the younger one that's causing trouble. You know, it's always one of them usually gets labelled in the family as the provoker, right? But you don't know that. You don't know that. You don't know what happened before you walked into the room at that moment. You've got no idea. And so there'll be times where like, so I caught my 8-year-old hitting my 5-year-old, right? I just happened to glance across and I saw her absolutely, she walloped her, and it was really out of character. And I despise hitting. I despise any kind of physical contact like that. I absolutely hate it. I won't tolerate it at all. At children, adults, I don't care. Nobody lays a hand on you unless it's to hug you, or you know, kiss you. So I was really angry, and then she was really angry at me, and I was just like, wow, what the hell are you angry at me for? I'm not the one that just double whacked your sister. And she was like, yeah, but she kicked me, and she kicked me really hard. And then I was like, right, well, now I feel like an arsehole because now I've just told you off for not for like defense. She wasn't defending herself, but she was angry because her sister had kicked her. So actually they were both in the wrong. Like they both got told off then, because we don't have any physical aggression in our house. They are my rules. I don't have very many rules, but physical aggression is something that I absolutely will not tolerate. So I then had to apologise. How could I have handled that differently? I could have handled that differently by actually finding out what was going on rather than going in gung-ho and just telling her off. Okay, so everybody in that situation, all three of us had an apology to make in that time. And that's okay. Yeah, as I said, I get it wrong as a mother. I'm not Mary Poppins. I get it wrong. But it's about being aware of that and being able to acknowledge that and make apology for that. And so when we talk about that calmly, when we talk about you know, if you are intercepting something with your children, or if there's just one of them that's completely losing control through anger, frustration, upset, what have you. I think somebody's decided to cut down a tree, so apology for the background noise. how going in and talking about it calmly and reflectively and helping them understand how they could have done it differently is what it's all about. So it's not about responding in that moment, but helping them to reflect on it, so that we are teaching them the right way to do it for the future. They're not going to get it right all the time. We're not going to get it right all the time, but we can get it right most of the time, and we can help them to get it right most of the time. Okay. Thank you, ladies. Again, I'll just say it again, I'm not going to mention your names, because this is going to go out to a couple of other groups, and I don't like to mention your names, even though you might be on a public page now, but just for just out of courtesy, really. If you haven't come and joined us in the Happy and Fulfilled group, please do so. I will drop a link, and I look forward to catching up with you guys soon. Final part tomorrow. All right, have a lovely rest of day. Take care.